The tale of David and Goliath, a battle beyond strength. In the ancient days when kings still ruled the lands and warriors clashed in brutal wars, the Philistines were a fierce and dominant power. Among them, one name stood above all: Goliath, the giant of Gath. He was more than a man. He was a colossus, towering above even the tallest soldiers. His very presence on the battlefield was enough to send shivers down the spine of the most seasoned warriors. His armor gleamed under the sun, a coat of bronze that weighed more than what many men could lift. His helmet was as solid as iron, and his spear was no mere weapon, but a beam. The shaft alone was as thick as a weaver's rod, and the tip, gleaming with a deadly point, was heavy enough to crush bones with a single strike. The valley of Elah, which separated the Israelite and Philistine camps, had been a quiet place before the armies had gathered. Now, it was a battlefield of nerves, where fear reigned supreme. Every morning, as the sun rose, Goliath would step forward from the ranks of the Philistines. His voice, a thunderous roar, echoed across the valley.
Why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants, and serve us.
40 days. For 40 days, Goliath had issued this challenge, and for 40 days, not a single man from the Israelite camp dared to answer him. Even King Saul, the tallest man in Israel, one who was known for his strength and courage, could not bring himself to face this terrifying foe. Whispers of defeat spread like wildfire through the ranks. Was this the end for Israel? Could they, the people chosen by God, fall to the hands of this monstrous giant? But in a small village called Bethlehem, far from the battlefield, a young shepherd named David was tending to his father's flocks. He was the youngest of 8 brothers, and unlike his older siblings, David was not a warrior. His days were spent watching over sheep, protecting them from the occasional lion or bear, and playing melodies on his harp. Yet, despite his peaceful life, there was something different about David, a spark, a fire of faith that burned deep within him. One morning, David's father Jesse called him into their home. "David," he said, his voice filled with concern.
"Your brothers are with King Saul's army in the valley of Elah, fighting the Philistines. Take this bread and these cheeses, and go to the battlefield. Bring back news of how they are faring."
Excited at the chance to see the war and his brothers, David packed the food and set out. The journey was long, but David's mind raced with thoughts of glory and courage. He had heard stories of Goliath's challenge, and though he was but a youth, a sense of purpose began to form in his heart. When David arrived at the camp, the mood was grim. Soldiers huddled together in fear, and no songs of victory filled the air. As David approached his brothers, he saw him, Goliath, standing tall on the other side of the valley, bellowing his challenge once more. The sight of the giant stirred something in David, a deep anger at the arrogance of the Philistine and the fear that had paralyzed his people.
Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?
David asked, his voice full of indignation. His brothers, shocked by his boldness, tried to silence him.
"David, you're just a boy. This is no place for you. Go back to your sheep."
Eliab, his eldest brother, scolded.
"You don't understand the danger we face."
But David would not be silenced. Word of his questioning soon reached King Saul, and the boy was brought before the king. Saul, his face lined with worry, looked at the young shepherd and asked,
"Why have you come here, David?"
David stood tall, though he was much smaller in stature than the king.
"Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him."
Saul's eyes widened in disbelief.
"You cannot go against this giant. You are only a youth, and Goliath has been a warrior since his youth."
But David was resolute.
"I have tended my father's sheep, and when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb from the flock, I went after it and struck it down. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine."
Saul, seeing the fire of conviction in David's eyes, relented.
"Go, and the Lord be with you."
He said, He offered David his own armor, a gesture of goodwill. But when David tried it on, it was too heavy, too cumbersome for the young shepherd.
I cannot wear this.
David said, handing it back.
I must go with what I know.
David picked up his shepherd's staff and his sling, and from the stream nearby, he selected 5 smooth stones. With nothing more than these in his hands and the faith in his heart, David walked down into the valley to meet Goliath. When Goliath saw the boy approaching, he let out a laugh that rumbled through the air.
Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks? Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field.
But David did not flinch. He looked up at the giant, his voice steady and clear.
You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day, the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and cut off your head, and all the world will know that there is a God in Israel.
With that, Goliath charged, his massive feet pounding the ground as he drew near to crush the boy who dared to challenge him. David, calm and focused, reached into his pouch, took out a stone, and placed it in his sling. He began to whirl the sling above his head, faster and faster, until with a quick flick of his wrist, he let the stone fly. Time seemed to slow as the stone flew through the air, straight and true, and struck Goliath square in the forehead. The giant's eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, the battlefield was silent. Then, with a mighty crash, Goliath fell face down to the ground. The Philistine champion was dead. David rushed forward, drew Goliath's own sword, and cut off the giant's head. When the Philistines saw that their champion was defeated, they turned and fled in terror. The Israelites, emboldened by the sight of Goliath's downfall, pursued their enemies, and the battle was won. Word of David's victory spread far and wide. The boy who had been a simple shepherd became the hero of Israel. But David knew that it was not by his own strength that the giant had fallen. It was by faith. The faith that the God of Israel was greater than any giant, greater than any fear. From that day forward, the story of David and Goliath was told as a testament to the power of courage, faith, and the belief that no obstacle, no matter how great, could stand in the way of a heart that trusted in the Lord.